So, we're only 2 figures in with this line, but I can already see it heading down one of 2 paths. Path 1, a fun and exciting line that builds upon the previous release, offering something slightly different to make it stand out on its own. Or Path 2, where we just get a repeat of the previous release, same weapons, same hands, just different heads, with no improvements to the articulation. And I'm praying to the figure gods that it's not the latter, because as it stands, Ichikawa Reno is a little lackluster compared to Kaiju No.8. It's definitely not a bad figure by any means, but it's also not great either. And for a release that's almost 8,000 yen or $70 US on Big Bad Toy Store, okay just doesn't cut it in my opinion. And given the fact that almost every other anti-kaiju defense force cadet in the anime so far wears exactly the same uniform and uses the same weapons, with the exception of the officers, it's not exactly the best start, and I'll get into the details as why a little later on. Still, I don't like to harp on the negative, and there are still a lot of things to like about this figure, so let's get into it. Kaiju No.8 Ichikawa Reno. Here we go. Alright, so enough negativity for now, because we are about to look at the things that I do like about the figure. First up, the sculpt is great. It looks the part, the proportions are accurate, it's a slim but athletic-ish 5'8" build. The combat suit itself has some nice details to it as well, like the chest armor, the spine which resembles the design of Kaiju No.8's spine. All the pouches are attached via ball joints that move out of the way for articulation. The ankle armor are also separate movable pieces, which is also great, and the shoulder pads are a soft plastic that feel good and move out of the way of arm articulation. But the best thing about this figure is definitely the head sculpts, and we get 5 options in total, as well as an additional in-action windswept bangs as well for your more dynamic poses. This is 100% Ichikawa Reno, and we get a good selection of expressions, including a face that's looking off to the side. I know off to the side faces aren't the most popular, but I feel they're great for action poses. The face printing is also crispy clean, but the one that takes the cake out of the options would have to be this badass looking mask face that hooks over the neck and makes for an awesome tactical look. Okay, now to the stuff that I don't really like or don't really agree with. So remember those pouches and that gun holster? Well, unfortunately the pistol doesn't actually come out of the holster. It's just for show, which is honestly a little bit disappointing. Would have been really nice if we got an extra support weapon option, but alas, once Reno loses his assault rifle, it's pretty much game over. No backup weapon. Did I also mention that we only get 1 trigger hand? So unless Tamashii are planning to make the weapons and hands interchangeable amongst the future troopers, then it looks like Reno can only hold a gun with 1 hand. No double wielding, no lefty shooting. The second thing that bothers me is the lack of any ab articulation, or ab twist for that matter. I'll cover it again a little bit later on, but the lower torso is sculpted in a hard plastic and goes pretty far up the upper torso. The double ball pegs are short, and there isn't a hinge system to help it bend forward like your 2.0 Goku bodies. So unfortunately, any forward crunch is pretty much non-existent, and twisting it side to side is also limited. Rockchella also mentioned this in his review, so go check it out if you haven't already, but I wish the ab section and the crotch section was made from soft plastic. So even with short double ball pegs, it would have been flexible enough to give some sort of movement in the torso. As far as anything you should watch out for, I'd say be careful with those tiny little ball joints that attach to the pouches, to the legs and waist. It's cool and works well, but you don't want to accidentally pose the figure in a way that might strain or break those tiny little ball joints. Other than that, everything feels solid, joints, paint apps, it's all top notch. Alright, so can we get this figure into a decent shooting pose? Yeah, I would say yes. For the most part, it's not perfect. I think the stock of the gun of the rifle should sit a little bit closer to the shoulder. But yeah, it's not too bad. You can even have, Reno kind of looking down the scope in a sniping position. But all in all, not too shabby. And I guess this is probably the most important pose for this figure, because I mean, what would the point of having a figure be if it can't pull off a shooting pose? Anyway, with that out of the way, let's move on to the head articulation. And there goes one of the ammo pouches. Do be careful with these guys. Like I said, tiny ball joints. Don't want to snap them. Alright, so for head articulation, Reno doesn't have the best range going up, unfortunately. And for a human character that is constantly fighting against larger kaiju, yeah, I mean, you can use the articulation going back, the ab articulation going back, which is, ironically a lot better than it going forward. But yeah, I guess you can use that, and Reno, I guess, can look up. We do have pretty decent head tilt and side to side as well. So again, not the best range with the head. Okay, yeah, he does look down. There we go. But it's okay. As I mentioned, these shoulder pads are a softer plastic. I don't know if you guys can see underneath there, but it is held on by these kind of straps that attach to the shoulders. So you can get a little bit further or a little bit past 90 degrees for the shoulders, which is pretty good. 360, of course. But unfortunately, not the best range going forward. And that's because of the chest armor there. It does kind of get in the way. We do have a bicep swivel. And we have fantastic range with the double elbows. And I do like that they have a little bit of elbow armor there, which is very much appreciated. It looks really good. He does have hinges and swivels at the wrist. Okay, so for the ab articulation, again, like I mentioned, I mean, it goes back pretty well, I guess. But forward is pretty dismal, unfortunately, as I mentioned. You do get some tilt going left and right, and there is no swivel at the waist, unfortunately. I understand why the crotch piece is a hard plastic, because you need, those sockets for those ball joints to pop in your pouches and the holster. But this piece here should have been a softer plastic. Definitely should have been a softer plastic. Would have freed up, would have given this guy a lot more range going forward, which, it sorely lacks, but unfortunately, it is what it is. For the legs, we do have drop-down hips, slight drop-down hips. So Reno can kick forward about so. And he does kick back a little as well, but we do have a tiny sculpted butt there, so it does kind of get in the way. Hey, Margie. All right. I'll be with you in a sec. We do have a thigh swivel, thigh cut, double knees. Not too bad. And before I forget, you do get a decent split as well. Going back to the feet do move down pretty well. These ankle armor pieces are on a ball joint, so they do move out of the way. And yeah, his foot does go up about that much. You get a nice toe hinge and some pretty fantastic ankle articulation as well, ankle pivot as well. So I mean, it's not the best articulation in the world. Wish it could have been better, but at least he can get into a shooting pose, which is, I guess, the most important thing. All things considered, Ichikawa Reno actually does come with a pretty good amount of accessories. More so with the head options, but it's still not bad. For hands, we get 2 fists, because every figure needs fist for playing rock, paper, scissors. A set of open, relaxed hands, which I guess you can also use to hold other stuff as well. Not ideal, but I guess I'll take it. And finally, a right trigger hand with a left support barrel holding hand for, of course, holding the assault rifle, which he uses in the anime. It's a cool looking piece and fits in the trigger hand snugly, but again, I wish we could have gotten 2 trigger hands and a pistol as well. Last but definitely not least is one of the best accessories to come with Reno, and it's a bonus comedic face for Kaiju No.8. I absolutely love this. With his kaiju tongue sticking out and all, accessories like this are just a toy photographer's dream. Again, Kafka in his kaiju form is extremely emotive, so I'm really happy that Tamashii keep giving us options and new ways to display our figures. So my hopes for this line is that with Mina and every other anti-kaiju defense force trooper going forward, is that we get better overall articulation and more options for the hands, weapons, and even maybe effects. Again, there's only so much you can do with all the other side characters that wear the same uniform, which I don't mind. I'll buy a bunch of Naruto's and Goku's, but you know, just make sure the base body is good enough to make it worth my while. Again, Reno is not a terrible figure by any stretch, but for the price point, I really wanted more. More from the articulation and, to be honest, more out of the accessories as well. Even though what we get is great, don't get me wrong, they're all done really well, and the bonus Kaiju 8 head is delicious. But again, going back to that price point of 8,000 yen, 8,000 yen is still 8,000 yen. Yeah, I know the US dollar is doing really well now compared to the yen, but when we're going dollar to dollar, 8,000 yen still feels like $80 here. Am I still looking forward to Mina next month? Yeah, definitely. The Figuarts Kikoro as well, but I don't expect Tamashii to implement any changes to that figure at this point. In any case, I hope she turns out way better than Reno. I hope she gets better ab articulation. I hope weapon swapping is possible, because I really want this line to succeed, because it would absolutely suck to only get a couple of characters and have the line be discontinued when the anime just started. This line has a lot of potential, not just with what it can do with the characters, but with the kaijus as well. So come on Tamashii, let's kick it up a notch. They're pretty close to being great figures. Alright guys, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed the review. Likes and comments are always appreciated, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one, which should be an archive review. I've been kind of backtracking on some older figures that are still missing in my collection, but until then, have a good one guys, and as always,
よろしく